Hi, I'm Lina. Welcome to Lina's Storybook, where we share the most unforgettable audio novels. Let's get started.
I watched the breath leave the woman who destroyed my world, the kitchen tool slipping from my trembling hands, before I fell from the balcony ledge into the abyss. But gravity didn't claim me. A cruel twist of fate dropped me right back to the beginning. Mia, honey, you're from the West Coast, so I don't know if you'll stomach my heavy Midwestern cooking. I told Connor to let you know that if you don't like it, you can whip up some of your healthy California dishes, and I'll learn how to make them for you. You're so thin. I'd hate for you to go hungry in your own home. The frantic, worrying mutters of Barbara, my mother-in-law, pierced through my ears, and that was when the violent haze in my mind finally shattered. I blinked, my vision adjusting to the warm, amber glow of the dining room chandelier. Wait. Why wasn't I gone? Didn't I just fall from the 20th floor balcony of our downtown apartment? I could still feel the phantom sensation of the rushing wind, the terrifying weightlessness, the bone-crushing impact that should have ended my miserable existence. I could still recall the painful memories of that chaotic night, after I confronted Barbara in a fit of absolute, blinding grief and despair. I looked down at my hands. They were clean, perfectly manicured, trembling slightly, but devoid of any evidence of tragedy. I looked up. Spread out before me on the mahogany dining table was a massive rich spread of classic American comfort food. A steaming green bean casserole, a heavy pot roast swimming in thick gravy, buttery mashed potatoes, and golden dinner rolls. Across the table, Sat Barbara, looking younger, her hair neatly curled, a tentative, hopeful smile on her face. A chill ran down my spine as I realized what day this was. This was the first evening after Barbara had moved into our newly purchased house. It was supposed to be a temporary stay, just a few months to help us settle in after the wedding, but it had marked the beginning of my descent into hell. In my past life, the moment Barbara moved in, she slowly took over everything. She dictated how the house was run, what groceries we bought, and eventually, under the guise of helping young folks save for the future, she had coerced Connor into handing over all our finances to her management. Because of that, when my own mother was diagnosed with a terminal illness, I couldn't even access my own savings to pay for her medical treatments. I had begged for the money, but Connor had looked at me with sorrowful eyes and said, "My mom says that with your mom's condition, even if we help her, she'll just be a money pit. It's better to save that money for our future kids." Because Barbara refused to release the funds, my mother, who was already in the emergency room, fighting for her life, passed away without the life-saving surgery she needed. The sheer agony of losing the only parent I had ever known had driven me completely overwhelmed. In a state of pure, unadulterated hatred, I had driven home, confronted Barbara to avenge my mother, and then, unable to live with the grief, fell off the balcony. Now, it seemed God, or the devil, had decided my story wasn't over. I had been reborn. But what was that voice I just heard? Barbara hadn't opened her mouth. Her lips were pressed together in a tight, nervous line. She had always looked a bit stern, her resting expression naturally intimidating. Was she putting on an act? Mia looked so pale, the voice echoed again, sounding distinctively like Barbara, yet completely internal. Is the food not to her liking? I told Connor a week ago to ask her what she likes to eat so I could look up recipes on Pinterest. What if she hates it and I've ruined our first dinner together? I froze. She hadn't spoken. The voice was echoing directly into my mind. Was I hearing her inner thoughts? "Mia, go ahead and start, sweetheart. I'll go grab some iced tea from the fridge," Barbara said aloud. Her actual speaking voice was much flatter, masking the anxiety I was hearing in her thoughts. As she stood up and walked toward the kitchen, she shot her son Connor a pointed look. The moment she was out of earshot, Connor leaned closer to me, his shoulder brushing mine. "Hey," he whispered, his tone laced with a sigh. "My mom says if you think her cooking is garbage, you can go make your own food. Don't give her an attitude, okay?" I stared at him, my heart pounding against my ribs. Wait. That wasn't what her inner voice had said at all. In my past life, Connor had said these exact words to me. I had been so exhausted from work, and his comment had felt like a slap in the face. I had thrown my napkin down, lost my appetite entirely, and stormed upstairs to our bedroom, crying myself to sleep while they ate without me. That incident had set the tone for years of bitter, unspoken resentment between Barbara and me. But just seconds ago, I heard Barbara's thoughts. She said she wanted me to cook my own food, so she could learn from it, not as a passive-aggressive insult. Could Barbara be thinking one thing but saying another to Connor? No, that didn't make sense. I swallowed hard, pushing down the lingering urge to confront him right there. I had blamed Barbara for my mother's passing. But what if she wasn't the monster I thought she was? I needed to be smart. I couldn't just snap and throw them out. I had to figure out exactly what was going on in this house, and if Connor, the man I had loved and trusted for 7 years, was the real architect of my misery. I needed to expose him properly. I needed to secure my finances, save my mother, and get a divorce. I'm giving her an attitude, I asked, keeping my voice dangerously low and cold. I haven't said a single word, and you've already decided I'm the villain. I set my fork down with a loud sharp clink against the ceramic plate. Connor flinched, clearly not expecting me to push back. In the past, I had always swallowed my pride to keep the peace. He reached under the table, tugging at the fabric of my dress. What are you doing? I told you before we got married, my mom has a tough personality. Just let it go. Don't make a scene over something so petty and make her upset on her first day here. Your mom has a tough personality. Do you think my personality is just sunshine and rainbows? I glared at him. In my previous life, I had bent over backwards, desperately trying to bridge the gap between being a dutiful wife and a respectful daughter-in-law. I had endured countless microaggressions because I believed that was what marriage required. Not this time. Right on cue, Barbara walked back into the dining room, carrying a pitcher of sweet tea. She paused, sensing the sudden tension in the room. What's going on, Mia, honey? Is it the food? Is the roast too dry? Just tell me what you usually like to eat back in California. I can watch some YouTube tutorials. I really want to learn. She set the pitcher down and shot Connor a sharp reprimanding glare. And how are you speaking to your wife, Connor? Have some respect. I blinked, momentarily stunned. The woman standing before me didn't look like the tyrannical monster who had held my mother's life ransom. She looked like an anxious, slightly awkward older woman who was genuinely trying to connect. This defied everything I thought I knew. I wouldn't dare complain, I said, leaning back in my chair and crossing my arms. I infused my voice with thick sarcasm. Connor just informed me that you said if I don't like your cooking, I should go make my own food and stop giving you an attitude. So, I guess I'll just fend for myself from now on to save you the trouble. Barbara's eyes went wide. She froze entirely, a look of utter bewilderment crossing her features. Did I say that? Her inner voice echoed in my head, panicked and confused. When did I ever say that? Aloud, she turned to her son, her brow furrowed in anger. Connor Vance, is that what you told her? Connor shifted uncomfortably in his seat. The charming, easygoing veneer he usually wore cracked for a split second. His eyes darted toward the hallway before he forced a nervous chuckle. Well, yeah, Mom. Didn't you say that if she didn't like it, she should just cook for herself? I said, Barbara began, her voice rising in frustration, that because she is from the coast, she might not be used to our heavy Midwestern meals. I told you that if she couldn't stomach it, she could make a couple of her own dishes, so I could learn how to cook for her in the future. I explicitly told you to make sure she didn't feel bad about it. She let out a long, exasperated sigh and rubbed her temples. You are exactly like your father. The two of you couldn't pass a message accurately, if your lives depended on it. I sat there in stunned silence. So Barbara hadn't been trying to humiliate me from day one. This entire foundational conflict between us, the one that had made me withdraw and treat her with icy politeness for years, was entirely fabricated by Connor's miscommunication. Had I blamed the wrong person in my past life? My stomach churned violently. No, it couldn't just be a simple misunderstanding. Even if he messed up a dinner message, that didn't explain how she supposedly demanded our paychecks, or how she supposedly denied my mother her medical funds. I couldn't absolve her just yet. I still had to settle the truth about my mother's situation. Mia, I am so sorry. Connor just doesn't know how to use his words, Barbara said, rushing over to pull out the chair next to me. She sat down and gently pushed a glass of sweet tea into my hand. Please don't be mad. If this is too heavy, we can order some takeout tonight, Ty. Sushi. Whatever you want, just tell me what you like. And I promise I'll learn. The sudden overwhelming warmth in her voice caught me entirely off guard. In my previous life, because I had stormed off, I had never seen this side of her. Connor rubbed the back of his neck sheepishly. Oh, my bad. I guess I got the gist of it wrong. I thought as long as the main point got across, it was fine. Don't be mad, babe. The gist is completely different. Barbara scolded him, though she sounded more exhausted than furious. You and your dad, it's always like this. Remember when I bought your grandmother that expensive cashmere sweater? I told your dad to tell her to wear it, and not just save it for a special occasion, until the moths ate it. Do you know what he told her? He said, Barbara says to stop wearing your old clothes and put this on. Your grandmother thought I was calling her poorly dressed. She held a grudge against me until the day she passed. I stared at my plate, speechless. A chilling pattern was emerging. Could Connor really be that dense, or was it intentional? Mom, let it go, please, Connor groaned, trying to laugh it off. Babe, I'm sorry. I'm just foolish. Forgive me. I couldn't bring myself to smile. But I nodded slowly, picking up my fork. I forced myself to take a bite of the roast. It was delicious. I told them as much. And the relief that washed over Barbara's face was palpable. Oh, thank goodness. Her inner voice whispered happily. I was so worried she'd think I was the difficult mother-in-law from the movies. My emotions were a chaotic mess. Part of me felt a crushing, suffocating guilt for the anger I had directed at her in another lifetime. But another part of me couldn't forget the despair of watching my mother's condition deteriorate, because we didn't have the cash. After dinner, I excused myself, went straight to our bedroom, and locked the door. My hands were trembling as I dialed my mother's number. Mom, I said the second she picked up. Are you free tomorrow? I want to take you in for a comprehensive physical exam. A physical out of the blue, Mia. I feel fine, my mother Eleanor replied. Her voice, robust and full of life, hit me like a physical blow. Tears pricked my eyes and I had to bite my lip to keep a sob from escaping. I know, Mom. It has been a while since your last one. My company upgraded our health insurance benefits, and I can add you as a dependent for preventative care. It'll give me peace of mind. You always were a worrier, she chuckled warmly. All right, if it makes you happy, I'll go. We set a time, and a massive weight lifted off my chest. In my previous life, her lung cancer had been discovered too late. By the time the symptoms were undeniable, she needed aggressive, experimental treatments that our insurance wouldn't fully cover. This time, I was going to catch it early. The next morning, I got dressed early. When I walked downstairs, Barbara was already in the kitchen, wiping down the counters. Heading out on a Saturday, Mia? She asked, walking me to the front door. What do you want for dinner tonight? I'm taking my mom to the clinic for a full medical checkup, I replied neutrally. Anything is fine for dinner. All right. I'll make sure we have something hearty waiting for you, she smiled. As I walked to my car, I heard her inner voice ring out behind me. Mia is such a good daughter. I wish I had a daughter like that. Connor is a grown man, but he doesn't have an ounce of that thoughtfulness. I wonder if I can invite Eleanor over for dinner tonight. We haven't had a proper chat since the wedding. I gripped the steering wheel, feeling a complex knot of emotions. Technically, standard etiquette might suggest I invite my mother-in-law to join us. But the trauma of my past life was still too raw. Yet, hearing her genuine admiration for me, and her desire to connect with my mother proved one thing. She didn't hate my family. About 20 minutes into my drive, my phone buzzed through the car's Bluetooth. It was Connor. Hey babe. He sighed heavily. Are you taking your mom to the doctor? Yeah. Why? Well, why didn't you invite my mom to go get a checkup too? She is upset right now. She feels like you only care about your own family, and you're treating her like an outsider. I frowned hard. I had literally just heard Barbara's thoughts. She wasn't angry at all. She was admiring me. She said she is mad. I pressed. Yeah. She is complaining in the kitchen, Connor said. his voice dripping with long-suffering patience. She said you're just throwing money away on unnecessary tests, and that you should bring your mom back here to eat instead of blowing cash at a restaurant tonight. You know how she is about money. Babe, please, just try not to provoke her. She just got here to help us out. My grip on the steering wheel tightened until my knuckles turned white. Connor, are you absolutely sure? Your mother said those exact words? Why would I lie about that? He deflected smoothly. Put her on the phone. Let me talk to her. There was a long, heavy pause on the other end of the line. When Connor spoke again, his voice was tight. Come on, Mia. Don't do that. You're just going to start a heated argument. Just do me a favor, and don't make a big deal out of it. Okay, because I was navigating traffic, I didn't want to waste energy arguing with him. I told him briefly that I'd bring my mom over for dinner and hung up. The puzzle pieces were starting to snap together. Connor's words were a stark contrast to Barbara's internal monologue. He was deliberately painting his mother as a stingy, demanding tyrant, while simultaneously setting me up to look like an ungrateful, hostile wife. At the hospital, the checkup took several hours. When the doctor pulled up the chest x-rays, my heart stopped. There it was. A small, distinct shadow on her right lung. We caught it remarkably early, the oncologist assured us later that afternoon. It is small, localized, and highly treatable. A conservative surgical approach combined with targeted therapy should take care of it entirely. The prognosis is excellent, as long as she keeps her stress levels down. My mother patted my hand, remarkably calm. See, it is a good thing my worrier of a daughter dragged me here. If we hadn't found it now, I might have been in trouble in a year. I guess it's not my time yet. Seeing her smile, vibrant and alive, I finally let out the breath I felt like I had been holding since my rebirth. She was going to live. However, the thought of taking her back to my house, to sit across from Connor and his manipulative web of lies, made my stomach turn. She needed peace, not a toxic situation. So, I drove her back to her own apartment, made sure she took her prescribed vitamins, and told her to rest. I called Connor, and told him my mom's situation, explicitly instructing him to tell Barbara not to cook a portion for my mom tonight. When I finally pulled into my own driveway, the sun was setting. I unlocked the front door and stepped into a house filled with the aroma of roasted chicken and garlic. Barbara was standing in the kitchen, carefully arranging plates. As I walked in, I noticed her eyes were red and slightly puffy. Before I could even say hello, her internal monologue flooded my mind. Mia is back. I can't let her see I've been crying. She'll think I'm throwing a pity party, though I still don't understand why she would tell Connor that my cooking isn't good enough for her mother to eat. She quickly turned away to wipe her eyes with a dish towel. Whatever. Maybe city folks just have higher standards. I'm just a country woman from the Midwest. I just have to try harder next time, so Mia doesn't feel uncomfortable around me. When she turned back around, her face was composed into a calm mask. You're back, Mia. Dinner's ready. She began grabbing silverware. Connor was lounging on the living room sofa, mindlessly scrolling through his phone. Wait, I said sharply, stopping Barbara in her tracks. Mom, I told Connor earlier today that my mom's test results came back. They found a tumor in her lung. I didn't bring her back for dinner because she needed to rest at home. What exactly did Connor tell you? Barbara dropped the forks onto the counter with a loud clatter. Her calm mask vanished, replaced by sheer, undisguised concern. A tumor. Oh my God, is it serious? How bad is it? She rushed toward me, her hands hovering anxiously. Connor, why didn't you tell me something this important? Mia, honey. Is she okay? Does she need surgery? Do you have enough for the deductible? If you need money, just ask me. Your father-in-law and I have our retirement savings. We can help. Her panic was raw and genuine. This was a woman ready to empty her life savings for an in-law she barely knew. It was impossible to reconcile this woman with the demon from my past life, who supposedly said my mother was a waste of money. I turned my head slowly, locking eyes with the man on the couch. You didn't tell her? Connor scrambled to his feet, his phone tumbling onto the cushions. His face flushed a deep crimson and he stammered. I forgot. I was just so worried about your mom's health that. It slipped my mind to mention the details. That look on his face wasn't forgetfulness. It was the frantic panic of a rat caught in a trap. I took a step toward him. Okay. Then how exactly did you explain that my mom wasn't coming for dinner? Connor swallowed hard, backing up slightly. I just told her you weren't bringing her, and not to cook extra. Is that what you said? Barbara spoke up, her voice echoing off the walls. You told me that Mia said my food was too low class for her mother, and that I shouldn't bother making a fool of myself. She looked at her son with disbelief. But in her mind, I heard her profound relief. Thank God. I knew Mia wasn't someone who looked down on working class people. It is just this son of mine ruining everything. They're just like their father, all of them, can't even pass a simple message. My blood ran ice cold. So it had been Connor all along. From the very beginning, Barbara had liked me. She had wanted peace. And when she learned of my mother's illness, her immediate instinct was to offer her retirement savings to help. The tragedy of my past life, my mother's suffering, the lack of funds, the terrible outcome. It was all orchestrated by the man standing before me. Connor had played us against each other, to maintain absolute control over the narrative, and ultimately, the finances. Mom, I just misspoke. Connor pleaded, looking between us frantically. I misunderstood her tone on the phone. Why are you making such a big deal out of it? Mia would never say something like that. I got confused. Barbara, though furious, seemed used to this excuse. She accepted it with a tired groan. Shaking her head, she walked over, took my hands in hers and guided me to the dining table. Mia, please tell me about your mother's condition. Whatever you need, we are here for you, she said firmly. Looking at her, the resentment I had carried across a lifetime finally dissolved, replaced by a horrifying realization of how deeply I had been manipulated. She is in the early stages, I said softly, watching Connor out of the corner of my eye. We caught it early. She doesn't need emergency funds right now, so please don't worry. I studied the man I had married. He had a good job as a mid-level manager at a local tech firm. He was educated, articulate, and knew how to navigate complex office politics. The idea that he was just a bumbling fool, who didn't know how to communicate, was absurd. He was doing this on purpose. He was building a wall of resentment between his mother and his wife, ensuring that neither of us would ever speak to each other directly. I smiled tightly. It is fine, Connor. Just make sure you're more careful with your words from now on. You wouldn't want to ruin our family's relationship, right? He looked incredibly relieved, rushing over to pull my chair out. Of course, babe. I'm so sorry. You know I'm just silly. If you're mad, take it out on me. Okay, don't let it ruin your relationship with my mom. It was a flawless performance. If I hadn't been gifted the ability to hear his mother's thoughts, I would still be a pawn in his manipulative game. Over the next few weeks, I played my part perfectly. I went to work, spent my evenings at my mother's apartment, ensuring she was resting, and spent less time at home. Barbara, true to her nature, often made extra portions of nutrient-rich soups and packed them for me to take to my mother. She even suggested I take a leave of absence to take my mom on a vacation to the coast, saying the ocean air might do wonders for her recovery. Connor, on the other hand, grew increasingly restless. One evening, after a long shower, I walked into our bedroom to find Connor sitting on the edge of the bed, looking at me with a heavily practiced expression of hesitation. I narrowed my eyes. This was exactly how it had started in my past life. The conversation that had ended with him demanding my paychecks. Babe, he said softly, patting the mattress next to him. Can I talk to you about something? Just promise me you won't get mad. Have you done something I should be mad about? I asked, my voice dangerously calm. No, of course not. I would never do anything to hurt you, he said smoothly, sliding closer to wrap an arm around my waist. He looked like the picture, perfect, devoted husband. When I remained silent, he sighed. Look, my mom is here taking care of the house now, right? It is not fair to make her pay for the groceries out of her own pocket. I agree, I nodded. Is the $1,500 a month I give her for household expenses not enough? I can add an extra $1,000 for her personal spending money. Connor smiled, though it didn't reach his eyes. You're so generous, babe. But my mom actually had a different idea. Here it comes. She thinks that since we're young, we don't really know how to save money properly. She suggested that we just hand over our direct deposits to her every month. She'll give us an allowance for gas and whatever we need. And she'll lock the rest away in a high-yield savings account for us. I stared at him, letting the silence stretch, until it became suffocating. That is your mother's idea? I asked, my tone laced with ice. Connor nodded solemnly. I know it sounds crazy, Mia. But she means well. And honestly, it is just money. If we just give it to her, she'll feel respected and valued. It'll keep the peace. You know how stubborn she is. Are you out of your mind? I asked, dropping my voice to a sharp, dangerous whisper. This is America, Connor. Not the 1950s. We are grown adults with our own careers. You want me to route my direct deposit into your mother's bank account? Connor nodded, his eyes wide and pleading. I know it sounds totally unreasonable, Mia. But my mom is just old school. She thinks she is helping us build a nest egg. Besides, aside from the mortgage and utilities, we don't really have any massive expenses right now. Have you completely forgotten that my mother was just diagnosed with cancer? I snapped, the audacity of his words sending a fresh wave of adrenaline through my veins. I have copays, out-of-network specialists, and medications to cover. Babe, don't get upset, Connor cooed, reaching out to stroke my arm. I pulled away. I know Eleanor is sick, but her prognosis is great. Right? Her insurance should cover most of it. You know how my mom's temper is. Once she gets an idea in her head, the whole family has to fall in line, or she makes everyone miserable. He leaned in closer, his voice adopting a sickeningly sweet manipulative cadence. Think about it, Mia. You're stressed about your mom. If we just give my mom the money, it keeps her happy. A happy household means less stress for all of us. And it is not like she is stealing it. She is just keeping it in a savings account. We can ask for it whenever we need it. I stared at him, feeling a deep visceral disgust. In my past life, this exact conversation had broken me down. I had been so exhausted, so desperate for peace in my own home, that I had eventually caved. But now, knowing what Barbara was really thinking, Connor's lies were glaringly obvious. If Barbara hadn't asked for the money, why was Connor so desperate to take my paycheck? Was he in debt? Had he lost money in crypto? Was he hiding a second life? Is that right? I laughed coldly, standing up from the bed. So if I don't surrender my financial independence, your mother is going to throw a tantrum and ruin our lives. I didn't say that, babe. Just calm down. No, I think I need to go talk to her right now, I said, marching toward the bedroom door. I want to look her in the eye and ask her why she thinks it is appropriate to demand my salary when she knows my mother is fighting for her health. Connor's face went pale. He practically lunged across the room, grabbing my arm and pulling me away from the door. Mia, stop. Are you crazy? Do you want to start a major conflict in the middle of the night? A conflict? Or just a little transparency? I challenged, raising my voice slightly. I've never heard of a mother-in-law demanding a tech manager's salary, just to help them save. I'll go ask her exactly what kind of high-yield account she plans to open. Don't yell. Connor hissed, panic completely overriding his usual calm demeanor. He positioned his body between me and the hallway, his eyes darting toward the door, as if terrified Barbara might hear us. He took a deep breath, forcing his features back into a mask of a desperate loving husband. Look, if you don't want to do it, fine. Forget I brought it up. Just please, I'm begging you. Don't go downstairs and fight with her. I can't handle you two hating each other. Let me handle it. I'll talk to her and smooth things over. I looked at him with icy detachment. You're terrified of her, but you're going to talk to her. For you. Yes, I'll take the heat, he promised, thumping a hand over his heart. Just leave it to me, okay? I turned away, hiding the disgust curling my lip. Fine. But my money stays in my account. As I crawled into bed, my mind raced. I needed to find out exactly what Connor was hiding, and I needed bulletproof evidence before I filed for divorce. For the next 2 weeks, I turned into a ghost in my own life, silently investigating the man sleeping next to me. I was convinced he had to be hiding an affair, or a crippling financial addiction. Why else would a man with a 6-figure salary scheme so aggressively to take his wife's paycheck? But to my immense frustration, I found absolutely nothing suspicious on his statements. I checked our joint accounts, his credit card statements, and even hired a private investigator to trail him for a few days. The Peapies report was painfully boring. Connor went to work, ate lunch at his desk, occasionally got a coffee with male colleagues, and drove straight home. Since I had started spending more time at my mother's place, he had even taken to picking me up from work to ensure I got home safely, playing the role of the ultimate devoted husband. Even Barbara commented on how thoughtful he was being lately. The lack of evidence made me want to double-check everything. I had to make absolutely sure that Barbara wasn't somehow in on the money grab. One evening, Connor was stuck in traffic, and I arrived home early. Barbara and I were alone in the living room. Under the guise of scrolling on my iPad, I pulled up a viral video about a demanding mother-in-law wanting her daughter-in-law's debit card. I intentionally turned the volume all the way up. The audio echoed through the quiet house. "You live under my roof. Give me your paycheck or get out." I watched Barbara from the corner of my eye. She was folding laundry, but she froze, her hands hovering over a stack of towels. Immediately, her frantic internal monologue flooded my ears. "Oh my goodness, why is Mia watching something so awful? Does she think I want to control her money? I would never do something like that. Did I say something wrong again? Did Connor mess up another message and make her think I want her bank account? Lord, I haven't even spoken to Connor about money lately." Seeing her genuinely distressed, I casually tapped the screen, muttering, the algorithm keeps showing me this nonsense," and turned it off. Barbara visibly relaxed. Her reaction confirmed it. She knew absolutely nothing about the paycheck scheme. It was entirely Connor's invention. A few days later, a new element was added to the story. My father-in-law, Richard, arrived from Ohio. Connor claimed his dad was having some mild health issues and wanted to stay with us for a few months, so Barbara could cook him healthy meals and monitor his condition. Given his situation, I couldn't exactly say no. Richard was a quiet, unassuming man. He wore faded flannel shirts, spoke in a soft drawl, and seemed to worship the ground Barbara walked on. Whenever she asked him to do something, he just chuckled good-naturedly and complied. "Mia, sweetheart," Richard told me privately on his second day here, offering a sympathetic smile. "In our house, Barbara wears the pants. She has got a fiery temper, and she likes things done her way. Sometimes she might step on your toes, but you just gotta let it roll off your back. Don't take it to heart. Okay." In my past life, I had thought Richard was a sweet, beaten-down old man. I had taken his advice, biting my tongue and letting Barbara's demands, which were actually Connor's lies, slide to keep the peace. But this time, knowing Barbara's true internal thoughts, something about Richard's subservient act felt incredibly manipulative. Every time he made a mistake and Barbara scolded him, he would secretly wink at me, whispering, "See, just gotta let her blow off steam. We all make sacrifices for the women we love." The tension in the house was building to a breaking point, and it finally snapped on a Tuesday evening. I had taken my mother to a follow-up oncology appointment. It took longer than expected, so I texted Connor, explicitly telling him I wouldn't be home for dinner, and to tell Barbara not to wait up. When I finally unlocked the front door at 8:30 p.m., the house was dead silent. I walked into the dining room and stopped dead in my tracks. The entire family, Barbara, Richard, and Connor, were sitting around the dining table. A massive meal was laid out, the food completely cold. No one had taken a single bite. The moment I walked in, all 3 pairs of eyes locked onto me. Barbara's expression was darker than a thundercloud. Before I could ask what was going on, Connor shot up from his chair. He practically sprinted toward me, his face twisted into an exaggerated mask of panic. He grabbed my shoulders and started steering me heavily toward the stairs. Mia. Oh my God, you must be feeling so unwell. Connor announced loudly, his voice echoing in the silent room. Let's get you straight up to bed. You need rest. I stumbled as Connor practically steered me toward the staircase, his grip on my arms uncomfortably tight. Yes, Mia. You poor thing, get upstairs and rest. Richard chimed in smoothly, standing up to block my view of Barbara. Don't worry about a thing down here. We'll handle everything. Just go lay down before she loses her temper. He added the last part in a conspiratorial whisper. I looked over their shoulders at Barbara. She hadn't moved a muscle. She just sat at the head of the table, her hands folded rigidly in her lap, staring at me with a mix of anger and profound disappointment. My mind reached out, and her thoughts immediately crashed into my head. I try so hard to be good to her. I cook, I clean, I help around this house. And why? Because she thinks Richard and I should be paying her rent to stay in our own son's home. To skip my dinners, to just not show up without a word, just to pressure us into paying her. Barbara's internal voice sounded dangerously close to tears, though her face remained stone cold. Maybe Richard and I should just pack up and go back to Ohio, but Connor said they can't manage the mortgage without help. Should we actually give her rent money? What kind of family charges their own parents rent? I stood firm on the hardwood floor, halting Connor's frantic push toward the stairs. Rent. When did I ever ask them for rent? I shoved Connor's hands off my shoulders with enough force that he stumbled backward. Ignoring his panicked, wide-eyed warnings, I marched straight past Richard and stood at the edge of the dining table. Mom, I said, my voice cutting through the thick tension. I took my mother to the hospital today for her post-op scans. I texted Connor at 3 o'clock this afternoon to tell you that I wouldn't be home for dinner. Did he not pass the message along? Barbara blinked, her rigid posture faltering. She looked past me to Connor. Connor looked like he was about to pass out. He rubbed the back of his neck, his face burning red. I completely forgot. Babe, work was so busy today. Barbara's expression shifted from anger to sheer exhaustion. She wasn't skipping dinner on purpose, she thought. The relief palpable. It was Connor. Again. We sat here for 2 hours thinking she was trying to force us to pay rent, and it was just my son failing to communicate. Aloud, Barbara sighed, her tone significantly less hostile. I see. Well, the food is cold. I'll go heat a plate up for you. Don't go upstairs, Mia. She is furious. Just let us handle it. Connor hissed, darting forward to grab my wrist again. I pulled my arm out of his grasp. The pieces were all coming together, forming a picture so ugly, it made me recoil. Connor wasn't trying to hide an affair. He was trying to financially isolate and control me, using his parents as the perfect scapegoats. And the worst part, he hadn't come up with this strategy on his own. I walked straight into the kitchen, where Barbara was putting cold mashed potatoes into a microwave-safe bowl. Mom, I said clearly, ensuring my voice carried into the dining room. Speaking of Connor's communication skills, did you really tell him that you wanted me to hand over my direct deposits to you? The bowl slipped from Barbara's hands, shattering against the tile floor. Barbara spun around, staring at me in complete disbelief. Hand over your direct deposits. What on earth are you talking about? I crossed my arms, leaning against the doorframe. Well, Connor told me that you think we're too young to know how to save money properly. He said you demanded we surrender our paychecks to you, and you would manage our finances and give us an allowance. I never said any such thing. Barbara shouted, her face flushing a deep, furious red. She abandoned the broken bowl and marched toward the dining room. Is that why you told him, Richard, and I needed to pay rent, to get back at me? Rent? I feigned absolute shock. Mom, I never asked for rent. I told Connor last week that because you do so much around the house, I wanted to give you an extra $1,000 a month for your own personal spending money, on top of the grocery budget. But Connor said that wasn't enough for you. He said you wanted the paychecks. Connor Vance. Barbara's voice shook the light fixtures. Connor practically jumped out of his skin, retreating toward the living room wall. Mom, wait, let me explain. Explain what? Barbara advanced on him, pointing a trembling finger at his chest. Did you tell your wife I wanted to take her salary? Especially right now, when Eleanor is unwell and needs every dime she has. Do you think I'm a monster? How could I ever look Mia in the eye again? If she thought I was trying to drain her bank account, while her mother has a health crisis. Richard hurried over, placing a placating hand on Barbara's shoulder. Now Barb, calm down. Your blood pressure. Let the boy speak. There is obviously just a little mix-up here. A mix-up? Barbara shoved his hand away. Tell me, Connor. Tell me exactly when I asked for her paycheck. Connor swallowed hard, his eyes darting frantically between me, his mother and his father. He ran a hand through his hair, playing the role of the overwhelmed, confused son. Mom, didn't you say? Remember last week, when I bought the new gaming console? You got upset and said we spend too recklessly. You said we needed to learn how to save like you. And Dad did back in the day. Especially now that Eleanor is sick, so I could help Mia out more. Barbara stopped, her brow furrowing as she recalled the conversation. Yes, I told you to stop blowing money on expensive toys and step up as a husband. How does stop buying toys translate to tell Mia to give me her bank account? Connor offered a pathetic, helpless shrug. I don't know, Mom. I guess I just misunderstood what you meant by managing the money like you did. I thought you meant you wanted to take over. I'm sorry, I'm just silly. You're not silly, you're careless, Barbara yelled, throwing her hands up in the air. She turned to me, her eyes brimming with genuine tears of frustration. Mia, I swear to God, I never wanted a single penny of your money. This boy is just like his father. He hears half a sentence and invents the rest. This is exactly what happened with his grandmother. Richard ruined my relationship with my mother-in-law because he couldn't pass a message properly, and now Connor is doing it to us. Now Barb, you know I never did it on purpose. Richard mumbled softly, looking down at his shoes in faux shame. We men just aren't good with all the emotional communication. I watched the three of them. Barbara was exhausted, alienated, and deeply apologetic. Connor was playing the fool, and Richard was the architect. It is okay, Mom, I said softly, stepping forward to gently comfort Barbara. I believe you. I'm just glad we finally cleared this up. I was starting to think Connor wanted to take my money for something irresponsible. Connor's head snapped up, panic flashing in his eyes for a split second before he forced a nervous laugh. Babe, come on, irresponsible. I'd never do anything like that. It was just a stupid misunderstanding. Please forgive me. You men need to be better communicators in this family. Barbara scolded them both, wiping her eyes. If communication breaks down, the whole family collapses. You need to do better, Connor. After helping Barbara clean up the broken bowl and assuring her we were fine, I excused myself to take a shower. The hot water washed away the physical exhaustion of the day, but my mind was operating with cold, calculated precision. I knew Connor wasn't just misunderstanding things. After dressing in my pajamas, I quietly walked down the upstairs hallway. As I passed the closed door of the guest room where Richard and Barbara were staying, I heard low, hushed voices. Barbara was downstairs making tea, which meant the men were alone. I pressed my ear against the cool wood of the door. You really dropped the ball on this one, Connor, Richard was saying, his gentle drawl entirely gone. His voice was sharp, calculating and cold. Why did you let her go talk to your mother? You should have shut that down immediately. The whole plan only works if they never compare notes. I tried, Dad. I didn't know she was just going to confront her in the kitchen. Connor groaned defensively. I've been playing the stressed-out husband for weeks, waiting for her to cave to the pressure, but she didn't even blink. Don't lose your nerve now, Richard scoffed. I taught you better than this. In a marriage, a man only gets true peace and control when his wife and his mother are at each other's throats. Your mom loves you, so she'll give you her money to protect you from a difficult wife. Your wife loves you, so she'll give you her money to prove she is better than your crazy mom. Look at me. I haven't paid for a single thing out of my own pocket in 30 years. Between your grandmother's secret handouts and your mother's management, I've lived comfortably. I know, Dad. I know the playbook, Connor sighed. But Mia is slipping away. Every time she talks to Mom, the narrative falls apart. Then you pivot, Richard instructed smoothly. You soothe things over. You play the fool. People love to feel smarter than us. It makes them lower their guard. Tomorrow, you buy Mia flowers. You apologize. But listen to me carefully. You need to get her money before she spends it all on her ailing mother. That illness is a financial drain. And that money should belong to us. I agree, Connor replied, his voice devoid of any of the love he faked so well. It is my future. Why should my money go to keeping a lost cause going? We need to get her accounts locked down, fast. I stood frozen in the dimly lit hallway. My hand pressed hard against my mouth to stifle the raw, violent rage threatening to burst from my chest. Her ailing mother. Keeping a lost cause going. That money belongs to us. The sheer, monstrous malice in their voices made my skin crawl. It wasn't just greed. It was a cold generational sociopathy, passed down from father to son like a family heirloom. Richard had trained Connor to be a parasite, leeching off the women who cared for them while turning those women against each other. So they'd be too distracted to notice the dynamic. I took a deep, shaky breath, backing away from the door until I reached the safety of our bedroom. My hands were steady now. The grief and shock had burned away, leaving behind a cold, crystal-clear focus. I didn't just want a divorce. I wanted to expose them completely. I wanted Richard's sickeningly perfect image shattered in front of Barbara, and I wanted Connor stripped of his career, his dignity, and every penny he thought he was entitled to. The next morning, Connor put on a masterclass in deception. He woke up early, made my favorite French press coffee, and presented me with a massive bouquet of soft pink peonies. My favorite flowers. Babe, he whispered, sitting on the edge of the bed and kissing my forehead with soft, believable tenderness. I am so sorry about yesterday. I talked to my dad last night, and he really helped me realize what a complete idiot I've been. I promise I'll do better. I'm going to start taking communication classes, I swear. I looked into his big brown eyes, feeling an icy chill run down my spine at how seamlessly he lied. Thank you, Connor, I said, putting on a faint, fragile smile. It has just been so overwhelming with my mom's health. I know, sweetie. I know, he soothed, pulling me into a warm embrace. Over his shoulder, my eyes narrowed. That afternoon, I met my mother at her apartment. She was sitting on her patio, sipping chamomile tea, looking healthier and more relaxed than she had in years, thanks to her early diagnosis and treatment plan. When I laid out the entire situation, how Connor and Richard were trying to turn Barbara against me, to steal my income and deny her medical care, my mother set her mug down so hard the liquid sloshed over the rim. Those absolute scoundrels, Eleanor gasped, her face flushing with indignation. They treat wives like livestock to be managed. And that poor woman Barbara, she's been living in that psychological cage for 30 years without even knowing who holds the key. I need your help, Mom, I said, sitting across from her. I'm going to set a trap, but it requires you to play sick again. Say no more, my mother said, rolling up her sleeves with a fierce glint in her eyes. Tell me what to do. I'll give an Oscar-worthy performance if it means putting those two in their place. Over the next few days, I secretly coordinated with my mother's oncologist at a private clinic. I arranged for her to be temporarily admitted into a private VIP recovery suite, under the pretense that her condition had suddenly mutated and spiraled out of control. Then, I initiated stage 1 of the trap. I called Connor from the hospital corridor, my voice trembling, breathing heavily into the mic. Connor. Oh God, Connor, I sobbed dramatically. The doctors. They said the illness metastasized to her bones. The standard insurance won't cover the experimental therapy she needs. On the other end of the line, I heard Connor take a sharp, hitching breath. What? How much is it, Mia? They need $80,000 up front for the first phase, I cried, letting out a pitiful, desperate wail. My savings are completely emptied out from the initial tests. Connor, please. You have to help me. Do you have any savings left? Can we draw from your accounts? Or ask your parents? There was a long, agonizing pause on his end. I could practically hear his brain calculating the numbers, realizing that my personal wealth was about to be entirely spent if he didn't intervene. I'll figure something out, babe. Connor stammered, his voice tight. Don't do anything reckless. I'll come to the hospital right now with my dad. Hurry please, I pleaded before hanging up. I leaned back against the cool hospital wall, wiping away the fake tears. A cold smile touching my lips. The bait was set. Within 45 minutes, Connor and Richard burst through the doors of the private oncology wing. Both men carried expressions of solemn concern, holding bags of fresh fruit and pastry boxes, as if visiting a tragedy. My mother was propped up in the hospital bed, wearing an oversized hospital gown, pale makeup lightly dusted over her face, and an oxygen tube resting gently near her nose. She looked fragile, weak and utterly helpless. Mia, Eleanor. Richard sighed, stepping into the room with a heavy shake of his head. We came as fast as we could. This is just devastating news. Mom's retirement fund was wiped out by her earlier expenses. I wept, gripping Connor's sleeve like a drowning woman reaching for a lifeline. And all my personal investments are locked up. Connor, you have to help me. I know you've saved up over the last 5 years. Can we use your liquid savings to cover the initial $80,000 deposit? Connor's expression stiffened instantly. He exchanged a swift, imperceptible look with his father. Mia. Babe, Connor began, taking my hands in his and squeezing them with fake sympathy. You know I'd give you the shirt off my back. But $80,000 for an experimental treatment with no guarantee. Isn't that? Aren't we just prolonging her suffering? My mother let out a weak cough from the bed, closing her eyes as if the words physically wounded her. What are you saying, Connor? I asked, pulling my hands away. Richard stepped forward, placing a hand on my shoulder. Sweetheart, let me speak to you father to daughter. My son's money is meant for your future together, for your children, for your home. It is heart-wrenching, truly, but Eleanor has lived a full life. Is it fair to cripple your young family's financial future for a gamble? He is right, Mia. Connor chimed in smoothly, his tone adopting a stern, authoritative edge. In fact, I talked to my mom briefly on the way here. She was furious when she heard you wanted to drain our family savings for this. She said that at this stage, spending that kind of money on your mother is a total waste, that it is better reserved for her future grandchildren. I stared at him, my heart hammering against my ribs. There it was, the exact line he had used in my past life. My mom says she is just a money pit, better save it for our future kids. He was trying to execute the exact same playbook, using Barbara as the invisible villain to crush my hopes and force me into submission. Your mother really said that? I asked, my voice barely a whisper. She called my mother a waste of money. You know how my mom is, Mia. Richard added with a heavy sigh, playing his role perfectly. She is cold when it comes to finances. She controls all our family assets, and she told Connor explicitly that if he gives you a single dollar for Eleanor's treatment, she'll disown him and cut us out of her will. Our hands are completely tied. Connor nodded solemnly. I'm sorry, babe. My mom even said that if you keep insisting on throwing your income away on this, you need to sign over your paycheck to her account immediately, so you don't ruin us. Or we might have to discuss a legal separation. They stood there, two opportunists in suits, waiting for me to break down, cry, and accept their cruel ultimatum. I see, I whispered, wiping my eyes. I reached into my purse and pulled out my phone. Well, if Barbara is going to deny my mother her treatment, I want to hear it from her own mouth. I'm calling her right now. Connor panicked instantly, reaching out to snatch the phone from my hand. Mia, no. Don't call her. She is in a terrible mood, she'll just yell at you. She doesn't need to call her. A cold, sharp voice echoed from the doorway. The bathroom door inside the VIP suite clicked open, and Barbara stepped out into the room. Connor and Richard froze as if struck by lightning. The color drained from Connor's face so fast. He looked ghost white, and Richard's confident posture instantly collapsed into total terror. Barbara stood by the sink, holding a damp paper towel. She had been sitting quietly in the spacious VIP bathroom for the entire conversation, hearing every single word through the cracked door. Her eyes were bloodshot, filled with a terrifying mix of heart-wrenching betrayal and pure unbridled fury. Ma'am, Connor stammered, his voice cracking violently. What are you doing here? I was here visiting Eleanor, Barbara said, her voice dropping into a dangerously low register. She took a slow step toward her husband and son. Mia invited me this morning to keep Eleanor company. While she waited for her scans, she turned her gaze onto Richard. Her husband of 35 years shrank back under her stare. I called Eleanor a waste of money, Barbara asked, pointing a shaking finger at Richard's chest. I threatened to disown my own son if he helped save his mother-in-law. I demanded Mia's salary, or forced a divorce. Barb, sweetheart. Listen to me. It is a misunderstanding, Richard began, his drawl entirely evaporating into a pathetic whine. Do not call me sweetheart, you deceitful parasite, Barbara shouted, her voice echoing off the sterile hospital walls. She lunged forward, grabbing a heavy plastic water pitcher from the bedside table, and throwing it directly toward Richard. It struck him in the chest, splashing ice water all over his tailored shirt. Mom, calm down. Dad didn't mean it like that, Connor yelled, stepping in front of his father to shield him. And you? Barbara turned her anger onto her son, striking him across the face with an open palm. The sharp sound reverberated through the room. I raised you. I cared for you. And you stand there, using my name to torment your wife. Using my name to let an innocent woman suffer. Her internal thoughts flooded into my mind, no longer frantic or confused, but breaking down in sheer heartbreak. My whole life, my whole marriage was a lie. Richard turned his mother against me. He turned my son against my daughter-in-law. They made me out to be a monster for 30 years. I stepped forward, pulling my phone from my pocket, and pressed play on an audio recording. It was the crystal-clear recording I had made from the hallway days ago. The conversation where Richard bragged about how he had manipulated Barbara and his own mother for 30 years, and how Connor needed to let Eleanor suffer so they could secure my money. In a marriage, a man only gets true peace and control when his wife and his mother are at each other's throats. That illness is a financial drain, and that money should belong to us now. Richard's recorded voice boomed through the room speaker. The silence that followed the end of the recording was suffocating. Richard collapsed into an armchair, covering his face with his trembling hands. Connor looked at me, horror etched into every line of his face as he realized he had been completely trapped. You, Connor whispered, staring at me as if seeing me for the first time. You set us up. You set yourselves up the moment you decided my mother's life was worth less than your greed, I said coldly, stepping up beside my mother, who sat up straight in bed, casually pulling the oxygen tube from her nose and wiping the pale makeup from her cheeks with a napkin. Your mother's scans came back completely clear weeks ago, Connor, Eleanor said smoothly, her voice strong, vibrant, and full of contempt. I'm in perfect health. But you two, you're financially, morally, and spiritually bankrupt. You're divorcing me. Connor's voice rose to a shrill pitch. Mia, you can't be serious. Over a financial disagreement. You're going to throw away 7 years of marriage. A financial disagreement. I laughed, a bitter, icy sound. You lied to me. You tried to steal my hard-earned income. You gaslit your own mother, and you actively tried to withhold medical care from my mother. You are a pathetic, cowardly parasite, Connor. Mia, please. Connor dropped to his knees right there on the hospital tile, reaching out to grab the hem of my pants. I was just following my dad's advice. He convinced me it was the only way to keep control of the household. I love you, Mia. I swear I love you. Get off her. You pathetic excuse for a man, Barbara snarled. She grabbed Connor by the back of his collar and physically pulled him backward with a strength fueled by decades of suppressed anger. She looked down at her son with absolute disgust. You are no son of mine, Barbara spit out. And as for you, Richard. She turned to her husband, who was cowering in the armchair. The house in Ohio is in my name. The retirement accounts are under my management. You are going to sign the divorce papers tomorrow, or I will take every single receipt, every proof of your hidden accounts, and ruin you in court. Barb, please. I'm an old man, I have health trouble. Richard whimpered, clutching his chest. Then I hope your health gives out on you. Because you won't get a dime of my medical insurance to fix it. Barbara barked. She turned to me, her eyes brimming with fresh tears. But this time they were tears of immense gratitude and liberation. She grabbed my hands, her knuckles white. Mia, I am so sorry for everything this family put you through. Thank you. Thank you for waking me up from a 30-year nightmare. You don't owe me an apology, Mom, I said softly, hugging her tightly. You were a victim too. The next morning, the fallout descended like a sledgehammer. I didn't just file for divorce. I ensured Connor's public mask was completely dismantled. The audio recording of Richard and Connor discussing their financial scheme along with explicit details of how Connor planned to use company time and resources to manage his fraudulent personal accounts, was sent to the senior executive board at Connor's tech firm. In the corporate world, ethics and reputational damage are taken very seriously. Within 48 hours, Connor was summoned to HR and terminated for gross ethical violations and breach of conduct because his reputation in the local tech community was completely ruined. No reputable firm in the state would touch his resume. Meanwhile, Barbara moved out of our house that very afternoon. She hired a top-tier divorce attorney, froze all joint assets, and legally evicted Richard from their Ohio property. When Richard tried to flee back to his hometown, he found the locks changed. Barbara had rented the house out to a group of rowdy local college students, leaving Richard without a place to stay and forced to ask his brother for a couch. When Connor tried to fight the divorce settlement to demand support from my salary, my lawyer presented the audio recordings and proof of his attempted financial extortion. Faced with a high-profile, humiliating public trial that would ruin his chances of ever finding work again, Connor signed the uncontested divorce papers, surrendering his claim to our house and forfeiting his rights to my assets. Within a month, the two men who had ruined my past life were stripped of their homes, their money, their careers, and their dignity. The ink on the divorce papers was barely dry when the true weight of Connor and Richard's arrogance finally caught up to them. In the immediate aftermath of the hospital confrontation, I didn't just walk away, I made sure the bridges they had built on my back were burned to ashes. The audio recording of their scheme hadn't just accidentally slipped out. The morning after the confrontation, while Connor was frantically packing his bags under the watchful eye of the private security guard I had hired, he left his company laptop unattended on the kitchen island. It took me exactly 3 minutes to log into his corporate Slack account. I uploaded the audio file to the company-wide channel, tagging the HR department and the senior executive board. By the time Connor realized what had happened, his phone was melting down with calls from his superiors. He was fired before noon. The tech industry in our city was a tight-knit community. Word traveled fast, and nobody wanted to hire a mid-level manager whose ethical compass was so broken that he actively plotted to bankrupt his ill mother-in-law. His career was effectively over. Richard didn't fare any better. For 30 years he had operated under the assumption that Barbara was too emotionally dependent on the picture-perfect image of their marriage to ever leave him. He had severely underestimated her. Barbara's high-powered divorce attorney moved with speed and precision. Because Richard had spent his entire life avoiding actual labor and hiding behind Barbara's meticulous financial management, he had no idea how to access their savings or investment portfolios. Barbara froze everything. She legally secured her rightful share of their assets and left Richard with a modest, tightly controlled allowance that barely covered a cheap motel room. Desperate, the two men packed up Connor's leased car, which he could no longer afford, and drove back to Ohio, hoping to at least seek refuge in the family home. But Barbara was 3 steps ahead of them. When Richard and Connor pulled into the driveway of the quiet suburban property, they found the front lawn littered with red plastic cups and broken lawn chairs. Barbara had rented the house out to a group of rowdy college students on a 2-year lease. When Richard tried to use his spare key to get inside and demand they leave, the students laughed in his face, threatening to call the police on the trespassers. With no jobs, no savings they could access, and no home, father and son were forced to rent a cramped, moldy 1-bedroom apartment on the bad side of town. I heard through the grapevine a mutual acquaintance who had the misfortune of running into them at a discount grocery store that their relationship had rapidly deteriorated into a toxic mess. Without Barbara and me to act as their financial safety nets and emotional targets, they had no one left to manipulate but each other. Connor blamed Richard for giving him the advice that ruined his life, and Richard berated Connor for being too weak to execute the plan properly. They were trapped in a miserable situation of their own making. I couldn't have scripted a better ending for them if I tried. 6 months later, the air was warm with the promise of spring, and the dark memories of my past life had finally begun to fade like a bad dream. My mother's health was better than ever. The early intervention had done its job, and the small tumor had been successfully removed without the need for aggressive chemotherapy. Her post-op scans were completely clear. She had a renewed zest for life that was infectious. We were sitting on the balcony of a beautiful beachfront Airbnb in Malibu, the ocean breeze tossing our hair as we drank mimosas and watched the waves crash against the shore. It was the vacation Barbara had suggested all those months ago, and I had finally made it a reality. "You know, Mia," my mother said, leaning back in her lounge chair and looking at me with a soft reflective smile. "When your father passed away, I thought my world was over. But over time, I realized that peace is worth far more than a wedding ring. Being single, being independent. It's not a tragedy, it's a privilege. You don't ever have to tie yourself to someone just because society expects it." I looked down at my left hand, where the mark from my wedding ring had completely vanished. "I know, Mom. I'm not looking for anyone. I love my life exactly the way it is now." I meant every word. I had my career, I had my mother, and surprisingly, I had gained an entirely new, unconventional family member. Barbara and I had stayed in close contact. After the divorce, she didn't just survive, she reinvented herself. Free from Richard's constant, insidious manipulation, her natural warmth and incredible work ethic shone through. Using the settlement money, she moved back to our city and started a boutique catering and meal prep business, specializing in the rich, hearty Midwestern comfort food she had always loved making. I helped her set up the business structure and manage the initial marketing. Within months, Barbara's kitchen became a massive hit among busy young professionals who craved home-cooked meals, but didn't have the time to make them. She was thriving. She bought a beautiful little townhouse with a massive kitchen, and we made it a tradition to have Sunday dinners together. Just the three of us, me, my mother, and Barbara. During our last dinner together, Barbara had raised a glass of wine, her eyes crinkling with genuine joy. "To the family we chose," she had said, clinking her glass against mine and Eleanor's, and to dropping the dead weight that held us down. Sitting on the Malibu balcony, I took a deep breath of the salty ocean air. I closed my eyes, briefly allowing myself to remember the sensation of falling in my past life, the absolute despair, the cold wind, the heartbreak of my mother's passing. But when I opened my eyes, I was here. The sun was shining. My mother was laughing at a seagull, trying to steal a French fry from the balcony railing. My bank accounts were secure. My heart was whole. The universe had given me a second chance, and I had used it to rewrite a tragedy into a triumph. The misunderstood mother-in-law had become a true ally, and the manipulators in the shadows had been dragged into the light and exposed. I took a sip of my mimosa, smiled at the horizon, and finally truly let the past go.
That's all for today. I'm Lina. Don't forget to like and subscribe for more amazing stories every week. Thanks for watching.